No matter how much public transit you add to a city, it only matters if it brings people to places that they want to go. Right now, Costanoa County is facing an issue of underutilization of the tram line because it's primarily built on undeveloped land. However, keen developers from all over town have their eye on the newly incorporated land directly next to the tram corridor. The first to dip their toes into the water are Bayside Builders, a real estate development group who spearheaded the development of the Dodge Hill neighborhood. The group is moving quickly, which leaves citizens and the county government concerned about the lack of existing jobs and infrastructure to support additional residents. However, with the acquisition of the land required to build the tram line, the county has put itself into a tight spot financially and could use the additional tax revenue from the development. So the project pushes through the red tape with ease. So in today's episode, we'll be building the first of several neighborhoods along the tram corridor, as well as making a few adjustments in response to changing traffic dynamics in the area. Now, before I address the elephant in the room, which is that big red number in the bottom right-hand corner, what I want to do is go over the plan I have for making better use of the new tram setup that we have. I mentioned this in the last episode, but I've got a lot of space over here in this area to build out some new neighborhoods, and I kind of want to go for a streetcar suburb kind of vibe. So basically all the suburbs in this area are going to be building up around this streetcar as the focal point. So I've got the contour lines up here for a pretty specific reason, and that's because you can see this road up here which kind of follows the hill on the other side of the highway there. And I want to do a similar thing on this side where I'm going to follow the hill with a similarly curvy road that will then connect up over on the other side with the tram line where things flatten out a bit. And then as the hill gets a little bit steeper, what I want to do is add in a hillside park, and the goal there is to just get people from the top of the hill down towards the tram line. And it may not have the most utility right now, and that's just because there is no development at the top of the hill. But once there is development up there at the top of the hill where things kind of flatten out, I want to offer people a way to get down the hill in a leisurely manner. And then we've got this open parcel to the left of Harlem Heights where I think I want to put in a high school because there's a lot of space there and it is relatively close to our tram line. So in lieu of having a high school in Baymont, at least we can have one that is near Costanoa but also has access to the tram line. A big reason for adding this large neighborhood right here is because we're in the negative on our revenue. And my hope is that this will bring in some additional revenue and then bring us back into the green. First things first though, there's two other things that I want to take a look at. So one is over here, and this is in the area. I'm actually going to pause it really quick because I think I can show how the change I make will have a positive effect on the traffic right here. But yeah, we still got this problem right here where the traffic is backing up all the way to the bridge. As I was looking at this and kind of editing, what I realized is that a lot of people are trying to turn right here. This lane right here is actually just, let me get rid of this thing. This lane right here is just turning left. And nobody's really doing that, or at least not nearly as many people as are turning right. And a couple of people are turning straight, but not quite as many as going right. So I initially had this particular setup because it preserved this sidewalk right here. But now that I think about that, with this highway off-ramp coming right here, this is not really as desirable of a path as it once was. So I think I do just have to get rid of that. And then for the left-hand turns, I think I can just get rid of that movement at this intersection and move it over to this roundabout, bringing it underneath the bridge here. The right-hand movement can then take the place of this path right here and kind of go into this road right here a little bit more smoothly. So I'll be taking that on for one. And then the other thing I want to do, and this is something that also bothered me while I was editing, is if we come over here, this, like, it looks awkward because this one rail line is going straight into this other one, but then it doesn't really follow the main line here. And I don't know, maybe it doesn't bother most people, but for me, that was like really bothering me. And before I can actually really do anything, I do just have to take out some loans. So I'll do that really quick. I know I have to do that. So I'll just take out, you know, $1 million, whatever. And then what I can do is just make that quick change. And once this is done, I can also probably take a look at the budget and see if there's anything that I can play with that will help me to get a better overall budget. So that is turning in there now. I think it looks a little bit better. Probably can really not even tell that much of a difference, but to me that feels a little bit better. Yeah, so the budget now, we can think about the taxation in particular. And there was that one segment, which is electronics, which is now at a more normalized spot. So I can go ahead and bring that back down. I'll keep it up at 10 though. And then the other thing that is important to note here is that the electronics are an input for offices as well, and then more specifically for software. And we can see that that one is huge here. So I'm going to go ahead and bump that up at least one, and I'm gonna bump telecom down one, and I'm gonna bump financial down one. So now that whole pipeline, I think with electronics might be influencing this software boost that we have here. So while that plays out, I'm going to take the money that I just took out with that loan, and I will pause again, and I'll make the changes here. And this is going to require me to pause it because I'm going to take out pretty much everything here. The first thing I want to do is actually open up the lanes a little bit. So we have 3 lanes. I know that I actually am going to ultimately need an additional lane here. And I'll just remove everything here. Now we have 2 lanes to play with here, which should help with the overall traffic flow. And this is really a flow issue more than like this intersection not being able to handle this amount of traffic. Let me get rid of this as well. The other thing that I know I have to do is I'm gonna have to come in here and make a 3-lane asymmetric road going this direction right here. So that'll allow people to have some time to kind of merge in this particular area as they go on their way towards downtown. I want to do this with all the snapping turned off because I can kind of see a little bit better where this lane is going to go. And I kind of want to bring this one out at an angle like that. And then for this one, I want to do something similar, but I'm going to get like as close as I can in there. So I'll finish off this first actually. And if you're having trouble snapping into something like this and getting at a 180-degree angle, what you can do is you can turn off snap to existing geometry, and it should help a little bit to get that snap right there. And then the last thing we'll have to do with that particular segment is I'm going to turn this small segment back into just a 2-lane road. And then I have to kind of take care of a lot of the turns going on in here. So we've got this one, we want to get rid of that left hand. And then I also want to get rid of the right hand here. And there's a lot of crosswalks that I don't want. So I don't want that one. Definitely don't want these 2 right here. Actually, this one's okay, but didn't want that one, and I don't want this one. And then if we kind of zoom in here, we can see that there's a stoplight that's been made here. I don't want that. So that'll allow for people to travel a little bit better through here. And then the last thing I want to do with this particular intersection is I want to come in and I need to probably make some nodes in here. So how I'll do that is I'll take a small segment here and I'll make a node right there. And I think at this point I can actually just probably upgrade to 3 lanes on this side. And I will actually make another small node right in here. This doesn't have to be a very long segment of road. So let's get that snapping back on like that. That snapping did not work nearly as well as I thought it would. Let me fix that. Okay, and then this one is just gonna go underneath this bridge right here. So this is a little bit of a challenging one to get in because it's kind of, things are bumping up close to each other here. And I can go ahead and turn off snapping now, and let's see what the contour lines look like. And we need to get under right here and then in right here. So it's kind of hard to see right now, but if we take a look, this almost looks as if it is just a normal road coming in. So it's a pretty smooth turn coming in over here, and then they can go on this way. So let's double check our work. There's one thing I know that I want to change, which is actually to get rid of the sidewalk right here. I don't really want people crossing there if I can avoid it. And then I think I should still have a stoplight there, I believe. I'm noticing this house is going to get demolished. So let's see if I can do anything to save that. Doesn't really look like it. I'll just get rid of it and it should build back in. So let's see how things shake up with those changes. So now at the very least, we have a lot of the traffic a little bit further down the road here. So it's still backing up, and I do expect it to probably still back up as we hit rush hour. Just because we've got this light right here and then this light right here kind of slowing things down a little bit, and people still tend to weave in this particular area right here, which you might think is unrealistic, but I've definitely seen people doing this kind of thing before, just not at the frequency that the citizens in City Skylines do it, but it is something that happens. So I'll let that change kind of iron itself out, and we'll check back in on the traffic there later. But for now, I want to get started on our new area here, and specifically I want to start in this section right here and get that high school in there. So if we check our education out, this is something I had mentioned in a previous episode, but because our elementary school pipeline is much larger now, I anticipate that our high school pipeline is going to need some work, and it looks like we have 1,500 eligible students and then only 950 that are being brought in. So about a 600 student gap, it would appear. And this space right here is, I think, just about as good a candidate as any for a high school. It is both close to Costanoa and a lot of homes here, but then it's on the tram line. So if we check out the high schools we have on offer, I think I want to put in, it is the Southwest High School. It fits pretty nicely in this area. The one thing that I don't love about it is that it's kind of like this really wide building, but that does actually kind of help in this particular area. So that works out okay. I kind of want to do something a little bit different than just like placing it right here. But one of the things that I did notice is that if I do place it right here, and I actually am just going to do that really quick, what we get is a scenario where if I come over here to our other high school, you can actually kind of look down this street and then see this high school. So we can kind of think that these are two competing high schools. Maybe they're rivals, and maybe they even share a field because this one doesn't have a large football field. There is some sort of field here, but it's not like the one that I put in over here. And then there's also this field nearby, the soccer field. So there's a lot of amenities in that respect right here. So I think that's why this is a pretty good place for it. I suppose the benefit of this too is that I kind of adhere to an existing grid pattern, so it makes it pretty easy to do something like this and then just bring this particular street all the way through. So I'll do that, and then I think I'm gonna kind of forget about this, other than actually there's one other thing that I want to do, which is bring a road out this way as well. I want to make sure I have those two roads in there because this one, there's like some sort of connection going on there, so I want to honor that particular connection. What I want to do now is kind of ignore the rest of this for right now because I want to think about the remainder of this neighborhood here. So where I'm going to start with that is I'm going to bring in a road here, and it's going to go from this area. Let me see the contour lines. This area up here is going to snake around this hill, and then it's kind of going to go down right here and meet up around right here in this area. So let me start over here because it's an unknown. I'm gonna have to decide where to put this. I think right here is about as good as any. I'm just gonna bring it out further than I probably need it for now. And then I'm gonna come back here and start snaking things around. I actually wanna maintain this particular contour line for most of the time. So what I'll do is I'm just gonna kind of pre-build out a few straight segments, and then we can build out the remainder of the hillside here. Okay, so if we zoom out now, we can kind of see what's going on there. So we've got this one street, and I'll get the contour lines back on so you can see what I'm going for here. This one street that if you follow it all the way over here, you have like very little grade, little to no grade as you come this way, and it brings you all the way over here, and you still don't really have much grade going on all the way up until here where you kind of go down this hill, and then now you're in this area of town. So you can get a pretty long way without having to hit too many hills, which in my experience is not something you normally find in San Francisco. So I'm pretty happy about that. Certainly from like a pedestrian perspective or a cyclist perspective, this is a pretty good route to have. The next thing I want to do is start thinking about kind of our frontage right here. So one thing I know I want to do is I want to bring this street all the way through with the maximum amount of allowable zoning. There we go, and things are going to get a little bit funky over here. I'm not too concerned about that because we have kind of our own little deal going on over on this end. So the next thing I'll do is I'll kind of measure out about how much space we've got here. We've got about 800 meters, which means I'll probably try to go somewhere in the middle here to be about right here. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm pretty unconcerned with it being exactly perfect in this area, just because there's that big hill, so I can't really expect much in the way of getting a perfect grid right here. But in the places that I can kind of have a nice look, I'll try my best to maintain some sort of order in this area. So this is fairly uniform, and I like that because this road right here is going to be our commercial road, and I'm going to try to bring everyone in towards this central area right here. The next thing I want to do is kind of give an alternative to getting up to this area. So that's going to come off of this street right here. And if I can, I'll get one more block of just grid right here. And it looks like it's kind of okay with that. And then from here, I'll try to work my way up over here. And I'm gonna have to kind of think a little bit about how I do this, because if I just go like this, it kind of works. It's only a 3% grade, but this sort of a connection up here doesn't really work that well. So what I want to do is I want to kind of flatten out this pad right here, and I'm going to overdo it a little bit so I have enough space. And then I'll flatten out the pad down here as well. So I would consider that pretty minimal disruption to the land, and that we can kind of look in here at least. This is technically still coming in at 90 degrees, but it's a little bit difficult of a left turn to make. The good news is I don't really expect many big like freight vehicles coming in through here. And then on the bottom, it just kind of curves nicely up. So that's what I was going for there. It also gives kind of an interesting look to this neighborhood if we look at it from an aerial view. The next thing I want to do is I want to start thinking about this particular road right here, which is, you know, it's not a main road per se, like it's not like market, but it is kind of like a big commercial corridor. I would consider this a pretty popular place right here. So I want to orient my grid based off of this street right here, rather than continuing this grid, which is at an off angle. The problem with doing that as is right now is, like, if I go here and go up, I'll show you what I mean. Let me use a straight segment. I get kind of like this weird thing going on with the zoning. The way I'm going to avoid that is I'm going to turn off this and use the zoning grid cells to determine where my street comes in. So that is where I want it to go, and then it should honor the existing zoning on this side. So I'll do that at all of these intersections and put in a road that kind of matches on the other side. So we've got that in there, and it again maximizes the zoning. So I think the obvious thing probably to do here is to just connect things up right here. I kind of want to think about whether or not I want to do that though. Mostly what I'm thinking about here is, will this road kind of make any awkward junctions where it, you know, turns around on itself and makes a loop? It doesn't really look like it will, so I will do that because I think it will look pretty nice. So now I can come back in over here and kind of finish off what we've started with, some additional roads going up in this direction. I think I want some more roads going up towards this road here. So one of those can probably be, if I take a look here at our major roads, probably this one is a good candidate because it goes by the train station. So we can go all the way up here till here, and then go from here and kind of snake our way up the hill this way. And I'm going to do the same thing actually with the contour lines and kind of get myself a pad up here. And I'm not going to go straight up. I'll go at a little bit of an angle. And I think having the contour lines up like this can really hammer home the idea I'm going for here, which is there's kind of a flatter area up on this hill here. I do anticipate having some neighborhoods that kind of snake around this hill up here. It's a little bit more developable than, say, this area right here, which we can see is pretty steep. And I've kind of enclosed this very steep area in right here. And what I'm going to do with that is just add in a bunch of paths here and make this very walkable. So the people who ultimately will be living up here don't necessarily have to drive their car or whatever to get all the way down here if they wanted to take the tram. They could go on a pretty nice like walk/hike through this park here and then end up at this road here and kind of just make their way to the tram that way. I will say this is definitely inspired by one of my favorite parks here in San Francisco, which is Buena Vista Park. It kind of has a similar thing going on where it snakes down this hill and almost connects these two very different neighborhoods. And having walked there, I think it's just a very cool concept. I don't know if that was necessarily the original plan, but it is definitely something I could see as a potential way of just improving your overall transit system by allowing people to better connect to your major hubs. So I was coming through here to see if there's any other opportunities for making some additional connections and really making use of the land we have here. And I think there's two that I can kind of get away with. So one will be right here, and let me level out this pad again. It's going to be coming off right there and then kind of cutting up the hill this way because it's pretty minor grade right there. So I'll go to about, let's say there, and then I'm going to just curve in this road like so. It also allows for potentially a path to go up through this way. And then I think also like over here I can do something. It's kind of awkward always using these smaller roads and teeing into larger ones, but kind of gives a unique look, so I'm not too worried about that. So I'll go out to here and then I'll snake up over this direction. So that'll allow us to get a little bit extra use out of this space overall. And now, before I get any of the zoning in, I do want to place a few parks over here just because I think kind of every neighborhood should really have a few parks in it. And in this game, we're kind of limited because I can't make this big space into an actual park. I guess I could probably with mods, but I'd rather not do that right now. So I'll take advantage of not having anything in here so I can kind of place down whatever parks I want. So I'll put all that down and then I can start thinking about zoning. And a quick park review, I basically just added in some pretty run-of-the-mill parks. I added in a dog activity park here and kind of tried to activate this area of this overall park right here. And I also did kind of a similar thing with this tennis court down here and added one up top as well so that people who apparently want to camp out here can have a nice view of the city from here. And then similar with the basketball court as well as a small playground. But I just wanted to activate these areas right here. I think I could actually probably get one in here as well. So let me get probably just another large playground would be nice in this particular area. And there was another thing that I noticed while I was doing this is that, well, I accidentally clicked on the district screen, but there is no district here. So I want to create a district for what we've got going so far. So it'll encapsulate this entire area for now. Well, not really just for now, forever, hopefully. But yeah, I thought about like maybe consuming it into Harlem Heights, but I think it makes sense to have its own area right here. So I'll make that and then I'll leave it open for neighborhood names if anyone has any particular ideas. Harlem Heights was a user suggested name, so I'm always open to having those kinds of user suggestions in the comments. So yeah, feel free to drop that. I don't have any particular name in mind, so yeah, definitely helpful if you've got one. Let's see what the name is now. It is Woodland Way, which I don't think is necessarily all that inaccurate, but I think you or I could probably do better than that. So that'll allow this area to get services. And the other thing I actually want to do before I start placing any zoning is if we come over here to this particular intersection right here with the roundabout, I want to rethink what I'm doing here because I think it just doesn't really make that much sense to force the traffic to split here. That's something I did in a previous episode when I was making this park. I decided that I wanted a roundabout here and I wanted to kind of force the traffic to split off into one or two directions and kind of prevent it from continuing on through this way. But I think I would rather make that sort of a movement this direction a little bit easier. And the best way to do that is to just bring this highway here and bring it into this intersection right here. So that'll allow traffic to get all the way down here, even past the train station and then off towards this direction. So if people really want to use this to get to the highway all the way over here, they can actually do that. So just wanted to allow for that option. I think it makes sense. It will also allow me to kind of integrate this road a little bit better into the street network. So I'll work on that. I might even bring in some of these roads here just to get it some extra zoning. So I like what this accomplishes. Basically, this allows for both of these neighborhoods to be a little bit more connected, but it still allows for this through traffic to make its way all the way into town over here. And then these two streets that kind of intersect, as well as this one over here, I've tried to limit as much as possible the amount of traffic that will kind of use these so that it doesn't cause any backup over here on Coleridge Street, which is the primary movement. One of the things I did is I added some restrictions on the turning that you can do here. So I only want people coming in taking a right-hand turn or coming out taking a right-hand turn. The only reason for that is just that it's close to this roundabout right here. So I kind of want to force a little bit of additional traffic over there if I can. So up next, we'll be adding in our zoning, and I kind of want to follow the theme that I've got going on over here, which is pretty simple. It's just the NA low density, but I want to kind of mix that in this area over here. And then as we get over here, I may use some other zoning types, but in general, I'll probably stick to that NA low density. I can see over here, there's some Southwest low density, so I may spritz a little bit of that in there. But in general, I think I'm going to try to keep it simple on the low density because there's a lot of work as well to do up here on Vermont Street and as well right here on Willow Street. And right away as I get zoning, I am noticing that there is actually not that much demand for low density residential, and that's no problem. I'll just get started on putting in some of these stuff fronting Vermont Street here, some commercial as well as some higher density buildings. Probably the highest density will be over in this area, which is already a little built up. So I zoned up in these two areas right here, and I kind of stopped where I was because I was seeing that some of the buildings were kind of encroaching on this hill, and it allowed for a little bit less space on the other side to be putting in buildings. But I think that actually kind of works out. What I did is I put in some of these Southwest low density residential homes because I think they have a maximum depth of 5 units. So it kind of works out that they are used in this particular space because there's not quite as much terrain to like allow for a larger lot sizes than that, I guess. So I think it ends up working pretty well here. I'll probably replicate that throughout this block right here at least. And then I kind of just tried to mix things up in this area with a variety of different building types. If we kind of zoom in, I think it works reasonably well. Some of it's a little bit awkward, but I think that's okay in general. And then I tried to kind of have similar building styles through here and then over to this Japanese medium density because I noticed that I had that on this side. So I think it fits kind of well right there. Over here, I kind of tried to replicate some of what I had done here. I actually don't really like this particular building, actually. I just don't like the way that it's facing for the most part. Some of it makes sense. Like if we look here, that makes sense. But this just being an empty wall right here, I think makes absolutely no sense. So what I'll do is I'll just replace that one and I'll kind of continue in this sort of a vein up until probably here and then decrease the density over in this area until I get to Vermont Street. So I've got most of this zoned up now. There's a few spots that I've left open, like up here on Vermont Street, still open. Part of that is just there's not so much demand for commercial at the moment. There is higher demand now for all of the residential categories, so that's something I'll consider when I'm putting this place together a little bit further down the line. But for now, I just want to probably start putting in some of these paths, particularly in this park area. And I did a little bit of this over in this area, like I had mentioned, that I wanted to integrate the existing path network over here into this neighborhood. And I kind of made it as far as this street right here, Coleridge Street. Part of the reason for that is I didn't want to have too many pedestrian crossings. In fact, no more pedestrian crossings than already exist. So like you can see that right here, I stopped short of adding a pedestrian crossing right here. And that's intentional because I don't want to have too much disruption along Coleridge Street. I want to allow for traffic to make its way through there. But I did integrate it a little bit. So even from this long park over here, I brought it back all the way to right here. And I think that is important in kind of making the area feel more integrated. Before, this entire area right here was isolated from the other side of the highway. Now it's a lot more integrated, and I added in some commercial along here, anticipating that it should be a little bit more highly trafficked. So now I want to take a look at this large park that we've got here. There's going to be probably a little bit of terraforming to go on here, like especially in some of these areas, like in the back right here. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of terraforming, but in this park area, it actually probably is pretty limited until I reach some of these roads. I want to bring that all the way down until here, this corner right here, and that'll allow people to get from up here down to Vermont Street while walking kind of down this path this way. And in the future, and probably in this episode, I'll be adding in some stops along Vermont Street. So in a sense, this park kind of becomes a part of our greater transit system in the area. So I'll get started on that. I did want to note too that I did have to take out another $500,000 loan, of which I've already used $120,000. So, and of course, hemorrhaging money still. So I'm gonna have to be a little bit careful in terms of how I do this. I'm gonna have to keep things slowed down, and I actually may have to balance the budget just a little bit. Hopefully, I'm getting close to the amount of money I need, but still, you know, fairly far off with 400,000 to go on the monthly balance. But yeah, I did want to mention that I had to take out another loan and potentially may have to take out an additional one as I do this, but let's see. You can hopefully see kind of what I was going for here. Basically, I wanted to be able to bring the houses up here and eventually the houses up here all the way down to Vermont Street. And I wanted to make sure that there was a lot of different paths to be doing that. So if you lived, say, in a house way up here, you could get like all the way to Vermont Street in a variety of different ways by following a variety of different paths. So it kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. And I think in real life that encourages people to actually use these walking routes, because if you're using the same exact route every single time, it can get a little bit dull and you may not be as inclined to use it. But if you see, you know, something different on each walk, it can be a little bit more exciting. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. That is a general thing I try to do in my cities, is allow for a lot of different paths to get places, because I think that just makes it a little bit more interesting. Because this area is a little bit more geared towards walking, I don't really want to do too much with the detailing other than just adding in some trees. on top of what's already there. I definitely don't want to be removing trees. I kind of want to keep the more or less natural look. So I'll just be adding in trees until it gets to about here, and then I'll kind of open things up and make it a little bit more about leisure. And part of that is just because this is a flatter area. So I think it's kind of nice to have more open space and people can sit and bask in the sun in this sort of an area, while this is kind of maintained for more hiking purposes. The rest of the neighborhood, like over in these areas, I'll do something similar. I'll just be placing down mostly trees. And if there's an opportunity to add in more pedestrian connectivity, I will definitely be doing that, just because in terms of walkability, like these are really long blocks. So if I can break some of that up and allow people to walk up and down these hills, I think that is definitely beneficial. It's something that you see in San Francisco in real life, is that there are tons of these like small public stairways that take you from higher elevation down to lower elevation and vice versa. It's for that same reason. It's just because as you get into the hills, some of the blocks are forced to be very long just to deal with the terrain. So I think that is something to be replicated here. So I've got a good chunk of the detailing out now. We can see from about this block all the way through most of the park, and then I've kind of deleted a lot of the trees because I want to do something a little bit different as we get down to here. But I wanted to just quickly mention that I think it's probably a good idea to get a fire watchtower in, because you can see how dense some of this foliage is. So I do like having one of those in here. I'll probably place it just like right next to this playground. It's kind of a cool thing. Maybe the kids like to see this thing as they play. But yeah, I want to make sure I had one of those in here next to all of these trees right here. It's basically a tinderbox at the moment. The good news is we are getting a lot of our demand back, so I'm going to come back through here and experiment a little bit. I think I want to put in a lot of the northeastern low density commercial throughout here. We'll see what spawns in. I know there's a variety of different building types and building sizes. I'm not going to worry too much about it being perfect at the moment. I'm just going to kind of let things build and see what happens. While that comes in, I'm just going to come through some of these other spots like here and here. And then over here, and place down some trees and get it looking a little bit more full and complete. I wanted to quickly interject here and just make a remark about one of the things that I'm trying to do more lately is kind of make more thematic choices with the foliage that I use. So this right here is an example. Back here, I used a lot more birch trees than in other areas. And that's just because I wanted to give these areas back here the vibe of, I guess, a birch forest. I mentioned this in another video, but you tend to see birch trees a lot together. You can have them obviously separately, but birches tend to be in like mono forests a lot of the time. So they are a lot more just with each other rather than spread out across like a bunch of different species. This isn't always have to be the case, but yeah, I just wanted to have that in there. And I did a similar thing in this park here. The densest part is this area right here. The reason I made that so much more dense than the rest of it, and it's kind of hard to tell like that it's all that much more dense, but I really tried to make this the densest part because there's just not paths going through here. So I wanted to make it feel like there was a reason that paths weren't going through this particular area. And that is just because it is so much more dense than the rest of what we've got going on here. It looks like we do have most of our northeastern low density built out here. And I actually I like the way that it looks generally. I do kind of like how this park is flanked on both sides by these buildings, and they kind of have like these windows on the side. But yeah, just in general, I think this looks pretty decent. There's a lot of replication. Like we can see this building happening a few times. As things level up, that might change, and in the future I'll redevelop anyways. But for now, I like how that's looking. I kind of want to start thinking about just redoing the tram route through here. Not actually redoing the route, but actually getting some stops along this area. That will influence the rest of this area's development. I probably will leave this kind of big green space over here undeveloped for now. That's just because I think like this high school right here is kind of a bigger project, and I won't be taking on the rest of it today. So I kind of want to just like leave some space for future development, and I can kind of integrate the space around it into the high school build as well. But for now, let's go ahead and put in some of those tram stops, and I'll use the NA ones out here. I want to get probably one before we start heading out this way. I want to make sure we get one last stop. That'll probably be right here, we can say, and then I'll put one on both sides. In the future, this side of the street will develop a little bit more. And then I think just like right by this park, I like when public transit interfaces with parks. Like I really like when that happens. I think it is kind of something that makes the public transit a lot more friendly to use. So it makes it a lot more enjoyable to use the public transit when it's next to a nice park, so you can get off and then just immediately be in a park. That is something that I think is done like pretty poorly throughout America, and probably in other countries and places as well. But oftentimes you'll see new transit developments be placed like in a sea of parking. So the idea is that people will just use it as a park and ride. I think the problem with that is that you end up with lower ridership because the stations themselves are they're not destinations. People don't really want to be there. And I understand that people ultimately, like, the reason they take public transit is to get to other places. But if your transit hubs are in themselves destinations, I think it just will naturally increase the ridership. That may not be visible in this game, but it's definitely something I see in real life. And any American viewers out there might share my frustrations with that. But I will stop getting a little bit annoyed by some of the American infrastructure planning, and I'm going to continue placing down some of these stops. So I want one by the high school. I think this is a good area here. And then I failed to place any other stops in this area, which I think is a great place to be placing stops. I think probably just one. I actually think maybe we'll get two in and just make this kind of a more dense area, densely covered area in terms of transit. So I kind of want one near this bus as well. So now with those in there, I can go ahead and connect everything up. For now, I kind of want to wrap up where I am with this neighborhood. And because we've got some of that commercial demand back, I think I can kind of finish off at least this particular area right here, as well as this block right here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish those two off. So I ended up doing a little bit more than I initially thought I would. Over here, I put in some of the, this is, I think, Eastern European, yeah, Eastern European and French low rent housing. I just think like this particular style of building tends to fit in spaces where you have a lot of space around the building. So in like very like highly dense areas, I don't think that these buildings fit in quite as well. So that's why I use them here, and I tried to put them on off angles. I think that's really important to making a place feel unique, is to put buildings on off angles relative to the street grid around them. It also just makes a like rectangular street grid seem a little bit more interesting. And then over in this area, I really just filled it out. I made a habit of kind of filling out these sides with the row homes, because if you kind of zoom in here, you can see how they kind of step up a little bit in their elevation, and then when they come here, you can't really tell that these are all like at very different elevations. So it really fills out the space quite nicely. And if we zoom out, I think that this area ends up integrating really well with the surrounding neighborhoods, a lot better than I initially thought that it would. I think making like certain changes, like the change to this road, bringing it in here, and then adding in zoning in this area really helps with that. There are a few spaces that I want to continue working on, one being like this small park area here. I want to make sure that that's detailed for the future, but I don't really think that that is something that I need to be doing today, so I will leave that for now. We're getting a lot closer on our net revenue here. Our monthly balance improved by, it looks like, yeah, a little over 200,000, but we're still not quite there. So hopefully that's something that will kind of work itself out as I add in more zoning. I just wanted to get a quick look at this overall area here. You can see that a lot of the reason that I have this negative monthly balance is that I just have a lot of unused space. Like all of this space in here is relatively unused outside of like this forestry industry. This I think this is like a ore industry or whatever. But yeah, so like this space is really underutilized, but I'm still paying the monthly fee to own these tiles. Part of the reason that I wanted to like build out this neighborhood was because of that. And then I think just like in general, this area is now going to be a good area to expand into. I wanted this neighborhood to kind of be a trial of that. So I have a better sense of how to build in this particular area. And one of the things I really wanted to work with was interfacing with some of these tram lines and making places that are a little bit more like destinations rather than just having a kind of sterile street environment. And a big part of that, I think, is bringing in these parks and trees and stuff like that. But overall, I am pretty happy with how things look right now. There's a little bit more work to be done, and I'll keep integrating this school over here into the existing street network. But as things stand, like I said, I'm pretty happy with it. This park as well, I think, has a little bit more work in terms of the open space that I left here. In general, I don't really like to be too hasty with these kinds of things. Like I don't want to overdo a certain space and feel like I need to get it all done at once, because I may have better ideas about how to utilize this space further on down the line. And then there also may be other needs that the city has that could utilize the space a little bit better than what I am thinking of right now. So that's why I like to leave some of these spaces empty, also just because like I forget and get distracted and do other things. So you'll have to bear with me on some of that stuff. But yeah, I'm happy with how this is looking. And as a reminder, if you have an idea for this neighborhood's name, then go ahead and drop that down in the comments below. But that is going to do it for this one, and I will see you in the next one.